Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of HSP TV. I am, as always, your host, Barbara, and today I am joined by the lovely Melanie McCool, and we are going to be talking about why empaths are so prone to burnout. And I've been looking forward to this topic because what I personally discovered, and maybe you did too, Melanie, is that burnout works completely different for empaths and highly sensitive people than it does for the other 80% of the world. So the way in is completely different and the way out is completely different. So I think it's very important that we are going to be talking about this. So thank you so much, Melanie, for joining me here today and talking about this very important topic.
Well, thanks for having me. I think I'm not sure what your entry into this work was, but I burned out completely. And being an empath, I very, intimately understand how I got into it in the first place. But you're right, it is very different for different people. So burnout itself by the World Health Organization is a syndrome from unmitigated workplace stress, right? So lots of people end up in burnout from unmitigated workplace stress. But when our empaths show up, it's like they had all this stress going on and then work was on top of it or
Yes.
not. It doesn't even matter. But it's the same, syndrome in the body and the mind. So yeah.
Yeah, I often indeed say that burnout, especially for empaths and highly sensitive people, it's not work related. It's always a combination of work and personal life. Because I also ended up in this situation through a severe burnout. I burned out badly. And for me, that was because I was already under a lot of pressure at work for a long time. And we can get into that later. But for
Mhm.
under a lot of pressure, a lot of stress at work for a long time. And then my boyfriend ended our relationship of 7 years completely out of the blue.
Mm.
And that was just, the final drop, the final
Yeah.
thing that pushed me over.
Yeah.
And we can work under pressure and under a lot of stress for a very long time and not end up in a burnout.
Yeah.
But it's a very delicate balance. And then if something as shattering as the end of a 7 year relationship happens, especially when you don't see it coming, then it floors you.
That is so true. I I actually say a hurricane is what took me out. And when I say took me out, like literally took me out, like that was the last straw where my brain just went, flip, you can't work anymore. So I was literally taken out of my career, but I didn't even know I'd already burned out my adrenals and then half my thyroid by the time I realized what was going on and I was totally
Mhm.
sick. But I say it was the hurricane that did it. Of course, it wasn't the hurricane. My burnout was actually kind of the opposite. I had the incredible stress from a prior marriage,
Mhm.
and then add on to that, then I was overworking to avoid the prior marriage and not mitigating that stress, and then a hurricane happened. So, but
Yes.
yeah, it is it is definitely there's definitely causes that are really common for people like us that the rest of the world may not deal with. So I feel it's a really important subject to address.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And what I discovered is when I ended up in my burnout, then the normal burnout steps were being applied. And that meant that in this case, I had to see the company doctor, and then the company doctor ordered me to a psychologist specialized in burnout, and they were going to do cognitive behavioral therapy with me.
Hmm.
And they told me that a lot of people didn't understand how they ended up in their burnout. One moment they were fine, next moment they couldn't do anything. And they had no clue what had happened or how they got there. And I was like, how's that possible,
Yeah.
right? Because I knew exactly what was going on. I felt the pressure. I recognized that my body was giving more symptoms, and that I started postponing going to bed on Sunday because
Mhm.
as soon as you wake up, it's Monday and you have to go to work. So I was
Yeah.
going to bed later and later on Sunday to postpone the Monday, which of course doesn't work, but your mind twists in that way. And I had gone to management multiple times to say it's not going okay and there's too much stress and something needs to shift, something needs to change. And they were like, oh, yeah, of course, we're going to do something about it.
Hmm.
And then nothing happened. So when they told me most people have no clue how they ended up in their burnout, and that's why we're going to do cognitive behavioral therapy, I was like, that does not resonate or compute with me at all. How can you not know it? How can you not see it coming? How was that for you?
Well, I was under so much stress that felt like I couldn't get out at the time. Right. So, and when I burned out, I was working as a sales and marketing consultant. So I didn't have a company to go to say I'm burning out.
Mm-hmm.
I basically was out, and then I went looking for solutions. So I found all the normal things that they tell people. So I say I became a crazy master of self-care, and I was meditating hours a day. And I believe that's what saved my heart, because I was in really
Mm-hmm.
dire straits at that point. I was meditating hours, and I still wasn't getting better, because I recognized that there was actually that the cause of my burnout was not just unmitigated stress from work. It wasn't just external or the things that I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
That a big cause of my stress was actually going on in here, and it was 24/7. And I couldn't fix it, even with all the deep types of meditation I was doing with the Dr. Joe Dispenza's work and all that kind of stuff. So when I went looking, I was like, what the heck can I do about this inner, it's my inner game. And I know it is now. Right. And you say you saw it coming. I'd been doing this work for a really long time. So I saw it coming too, but I didn't know it was going to take me where it took me. Okay.
Oh, definitely. I
But
didn't
they
know
said I
that
had
either.
no idea that I would be unable to work and support my kids.
Yeah.
And I was scared. Okay.
Yes.
I had no idea that my brain was just going to go, literally the brain changes that happened. Like I had no idea I was going to get back. But anyway, I was like, I have no idea I didn't know how to help myself. And so I went searching, and I found hypnotherapy. And hypnotherapy is really what helped, because it was the inner workings. It was the habits that I had developed over a lifetime that had to be basically undone. I had to unlearn the things that had gotten me to the point of burnout. And
Mm-hmm.
change is hard. It's
Yes.
ridiculously hard. It's much easier if you're doing subconscious modality to do something about it. So I said, they didn't have the cure for me. So I created a cure for my clients, because I had to.
Mm-hmm.
I recognize that there's a real shortage of actual help. And they say, it could take a sabbatical of 12 weeks or more to overcome burnout. And most people do not have 12 weeks to breathe, to get their brain back. And even then, it's not
Oh.
guaranteed if you're not doing the stuff to actually change here and change your habits and, do the things that will actually heal you. So yeah, that's my story. It was harrowing. That's the word. It was absolutely dreadful and
Mm-hmm.
scary.
Thank you
But
for sharing that.
I did, yeah, but I did bounce back, and I was like, okay. At that point, I was like, I can't go back to doing what I was doing. Couldn't. And so I became a hypnotherapist. Like that's what happened. And so I was
Yeah.
like, well, this thing that really,
Mm-hmm.
really helped me, because I was a high achiever, a super achiever, as you say, and I recognize these patterns in women, especially women like me, who are overachievers and the overdoers, and not mitigating the stress, whether they're in corporate or they're in running their own business or just running their life. Overachievers who are empaths are like, they're just in deep trouble.
No, and there are a couple of factors that play a role into ending up in your burnout. As for and they don't all have to be in play at the same time, but things that could contribute to it is that you are trying to be someone you are not, because for whatever reason you believed that there was something wrong with you, or that everybody else is different from you and you need to change in order to fit in with the rest of the world. So a lot of people have moved away from who they really are, and then also choose a job that does not fit who they are, that does not fit their natural talents. And that is one of the factors that can lead to a burnout. Another one could be that you've lost touch with your body and you're not able to communicate with your body. So you're not recognizing that the headaches that you've been getting and that are becoming more frequent, or the nausea that you're feeling, or the softer stool stool or all the other bodily signals that your body
Mm-hmm.
gives to warn
Yep.
you you're on the wrong track, you don't
Yep.
recognize them.
Right.
Or if you do recognize that there's something going on, you don't know how to interpret them, or you don't know how to change them or what to do with them. Those are also things that play a role. And many of us are perfectionists. And that doesn't mean that your house is always perfectly organized and clean. No, but it means that you do 200% your best. You give
Always.
so much from yourself, and the bar is really high,
Yep.
especially for yourself. And you have great expectations of yourself, and you push yourself, and you push, you push, you push. That is a factor that can play a role into getting a burnout.
Totally.
And it can also be what happened to me, for instance, was that I was a project manager on a project, but I had no real say. So I was supposed to be able to solve problems, but
Mm.
I didn't get the room from my boss to actually solve problems. So I could only signal problems to my boss, and he then needed to solve it, which would not happen. And then I was stuck between a rock and a hard place. And
Yeah.
then if the client was complaining about lack of progress for the project, it was always my fault. So my
Mm.
boss constantly threw me under the bus.
Mm.
And then that speaks to our sense of injustice. This
Yeah.
is not fair. The way you're treating me is not fair. And that also brings a lot of stress. And then we feel responsible for other people. I felt responsible for my team, and I couldn't deliver, and I saw my team's stress go up. And we feel responsible for so many people, and we like harmony, and we like taking care of people. So
Yeah.
all of these factors play a role in us being more prone for a burnout.
Yeah. That's actually my third reason why empaths are more prone to burnout, because we are at a greater risk of taking on other people's problems, like as a rule,
Yes.
like we just do. Um, yeah. So for me, I was throwing myself into my work to avoid intense dissatisfaction with the rest of my life. Plus, add on to that the overachiever, which is I'm going to do it. I'm going to be excellent at it. I'm going to do it myself too. So that's I didn't ask for support. I just ran the show until I just about died.
Yeah.
Learned that lesson too. Learned that lesson too. So, so in my understanding, and after working with like 500 plus clients now, and them coming to me, many of them in burnout, not even knowing that that's what they're experiencing the symptoms of, and then unraveling the reasons why. Some of them label, some of my clients do come and say, I'm an empath, right? And they have their what they just define that as, which helps because then I can look at the things that I know are typical patterns. But many of them don't even realize that's what's going on. So
Mhm.
in my experience, and I'm just saying in my experience because there's many different experiences. What I find is that most of us, most empaths, are empathetic and hypervigilant because we had to be as children,
Yes.
right? So there's some sort of trauma background or something. And so if you've got an alcoholic parent or any reason to be hypervigilant as a child, this is the development of an empath. And then there's nature versus nurture, the question of, am I a highly sensitive person because of that? Or was I that? And then this bit of trauma made it just over the top. You know what I mean? That's a nature
Yes.
versus nurture because we can't tell.
No, because a highly sensitive person is born that way. So it's not
Right.
something that you can get from something else. It's how you are wired
It's
internally.
how
But I get what
wired
you mean. Am I
it can be.
overly sensitive because of that, or did I become overly sensitive?
Exactly. Right. So either way, it looks very much the same. And then if you have the two together, you got a real.
Yes, exactly.
So the first thing is that they don't even realize that they kind of have this overactive, constant nervous system dysregulation. So if you're living in a constant state of hypervigilance, of looking around for the lion or for the look on that person's face that you don't even realize you're doing, and that's just the way you operate, then you're kind of at this high level of stress. before the work stress piled on, before the relationship stress, before the freaking, excuse me, with the hurricane, you're already up to here. You're already almost ready to drown because that's the way your nervous system's wired. And then that's number one, the reason why I think they're far more prone to burnout. And then the second is, and it seems that we feel like we're more intuitive, and whether that intuition is actually intuition or that learning to read the world at a way that most people would never be able to. But that again is like having you're on all the time, right? So if you're on and looking and learning more about the world and more aware of what's going on in the world, feeling like that, and really aware of how deeply other people are suffering, that again, it's a source of exhaustion.
Yes. And I don't know how that is in the United States, but what's connected to what you're talking about is here in the Netherlands, they introduced something they call office gardens, which means you don't have your own office anymore, but they made an open floor plan and then put 20 or 30 people in the same room, just divided by a desk divider. And as an empath and a highly sensitive person, we pick up on everything. We hear the slurping and we hear the whistling and the clicking with the pen, and maybe the
feel
radio
the energy
that
of that person over there who's feeling sad. And because you can read it, you can feel it, read it.
And you smell what you're smelling. Somebody might be drinking something that you don't like, or somebody might wear a very heavy cologne or
please
perfume.
Don't wear anybody who's watching this, just for the sake of the world, don't overdo it. And don't do it at all if you're going to be traveling somewhere with people like us around. It's horrible.
Yes.
Anyway, thanks. Thank you.
Exactly. So it's also all the unconscious things that we are picking up out of our environments. It's we have a sensory antenna that's just much more finely tuned. So that means that we literally hear more, feel more, see more, smell more, taste more. So a lot more information comes in.
Is it like now it's over your lips, right? Now you're like, oh my gosh.
Yes.
Now you're functioning, because we are incredibly resilient beings. Like there's just some, there's some stuff that's gone on. There's a nice wall that kept all that trauma back there, so you can be a highly functioning adult, and you're powering through. And then, it just takes one straw to break the camel's back, as you said. And then the same thing that may have been the choice, the cause of being empathic in the first place, that trauma, whatever went on as a child, that's where the people-pleasing, codependent behaviors pop up. And here we are, and it doesn't, listen, when I say that, some people think, oh, that's not me, because they're a strong, powerful woman or person. It doesn't matter. We still may have those qualities. Just because you appear to be strong and not need anybody's help, that would be like me. People would look at me and not think I needed any help. I was suffering for years. I didn't ask for help. They didn't think I needed help because I'm strong. Yeah. But here I am, totally codependent. This is me all over the place. So then taking on the burden of all of the humans who are around you, who are suffering, who need you. That's number 3. And then number 4 is one that is, because of all that going on, there is a tendency to want to numb it out, to quiet it.
Addiction is one of the pitfalls.
That's it. And so you throw addiction on top of this fire, and boom.
And it can be any type of addiction. It doesn't have to be alcohol or drugs. It can
sex,
also
food, gambling, shopping, scrolling, social media, that any kind of addiction. It's this need or this desire, which doesn't actually do it. It exasperates the problem. It doesn't help, doesn't actually cure, obviously. No. But yeah, addiction would be the last bit of flame on that fire. This is what I found.
Yes.
In working with people. So, and And helping people then who are empaths to overcome burnout becomes a very specialized, process. And but it does involve, there's these major patterns that we can work with and help people to move through, right? I think that most empaths will, if they are trying to help themselves, they will learn something about boundaries, right?
Yes.
And of protecting their energy.
Yes.
Because how the heck is an empath a hypnotherapist without taking on the problems of the world? Well, you learn.
But that's
You
for
learn.
all type of
All
healers or
all
coaches or
practitioners
whatever.
must have a shield of protection. This isn't a
Yes.
question. But there are many who go into our work not knowing.
Yes.
And they end up
Genuine desire for wanting
yeah,
to help people, and
yeah,
then or
not
sometimes they
knowing.
roll into it by accident and they
Yeah,
have no clue why they're
yeah,
always drained and energyless on the couch at the end of the day.
yeah. And I work with I actually help hypnotherapists have more successful practice too. So I speak to many who are burning out, and I think to myself, we're the people who have, well, theoretically, have the tools. But I just believe that they didn't know that they needed boundaries and shield of protection and to, breaking their
That could be
addiction.
the case.
Yeah,
They often also say, for instance, doctors make the worst patients, but the same is also for our profession. So the fact that you
sure.
know doesn't automatically mean that you also practice it. So it's also
Yeah.
about practicing what you preach. It's just you first need to know about it, but then you actually also have to do it. And
Mhm.
that's also what I see with a lot of people when they are in a need, when they are not okay, when they are too stressed or burned out, then they're very diligent and they're doing their protection and they're doing their grounding and they're
Right.
doing their breathing and they're doing their exercises and they're using their tools, and then it steadily improves and it goes better and better. And then they think like, everything's awesome. I can do everything again. And then they sort of stop thinking about doing their tools,
Oh,
stop
thank you
doing
for
their,
saying that, because I literally just had this conversation, because that's the truth. Like I told my client, I said, this is not medicine for when you're sick. This is your medicine to stay well.
yes.
So, because she said she'd stopped doing, her self-hypnosis thing. I was like, well, the thing is, you have a default mode network, unfortunately, and your default mode network will go back to the old if you don't keep telling it to move forward and progress.
Yes.
And you don't want to wait until you're in pain. That's like somebody who's having a panic attack and thinking they're going to now activate all the things that they learned about how to help themselves. No, they're going to have a panic attack, right? So you have to practice the things that keep you well before you're sick. And that's what, I mean, I just call them my rules for life. There are
Yeah, it's your new way of living.
my new way of living. And there is, and it's, if I hadn't implemented them, I would never have been able to go back to work without fear that I would burn out again.
Mhm.
And that's fear, without fear that I would lose my life. I mean, that's really what we're talking about. They say burnout, they call it a mental syndrome. They don't attach it to the physical, but we know,
It's
clearly
both.
we know.
Yeah, yeah.
And they say, the World Health Organization won't connect them, but they will say, but 70% of doctors' visits are from stress. So yeah, so they're all one loop. So I wouldn't have been able to go back to work for fear of death. At least maybe not at the way that I love to work, right? For fear of
Yes.
death if I didn't have my rules for a new way of living. That I call it radical self-care. It's not just self-care, it's upregulating
Mhm.
the neurochemistry of peace so that stress can be, downregulated. The
I bet a lot of
biochemistry of stress can be.
empaths and highly sensitive people feel that if they take care of themselves, if they think of themselves, think about themselves, that they are being egoistical or
Yeah.
narcissistical.
But that's what they were taught when they were
Yes.
kids. Yeah, that's what they were taught. And so I have a phrase I use, and that's, well, what's best for me is best for everyone. And when I first say that to them, they're like, what the heck are you talking about? I could never say.
Mhm.
I said, I'll tell you what, I would never say that to somebody with narcissistic tendencies, but my clients aren't that.
No.
You, empathic, beautiful human, could never love yourself too much and end up the way that you're thinking it is, egotistical or narcissistic. It could never be that way.
No.
You could only ever love yourself just enough to stay, happy, healthy, and wealthy, should you choose, right? You don't have, and I think that they're like, oh, right. So you wouldn't even tell me this if I wasn't a jerk. Okay, cool. So maybe I can love, maybe I can say what's best for me is what's best for everyone.
I usually also help them to turn it around. So, for instance, they have been invited to go for drinks in the city on a Thursday evening, but they feel drained at the end of the day and they still need to work on Friday, and they would much rather spend it on the couch with a cup of tea, under a blanket with a good book, and then go to bed early. But they promised, right? They asked and they promised, and they feel obligated. And then they force themselves to go. Then they're in an overcrowded pub or bar, and there's so many people, and their energy drains even more, and they're getting not enough sleep, and usually that leads to issues the next day at work. And then I tell them, if you turn it around and you had been the one to ask your best friend, and your best friend was feeling exactly like you are feeling right now, what would you rather have? That she was honest and told you, I'm sorry, hon, I know I promised I would go with you in the city, but I'm not feeling okay, and can we do a rain check? Or would you want her to not say anything to you at all, push herself, force herself to come join you because she promised you?
Right on.
Oh, no, I would want her to be honest.
So be your own best friend, would you? Be your own best friend then. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I have a phrase that I say in my head, no FOMO, which I don't have a fear of missing out. So I've got a crowd. I've got a beautiful community of people now. I didn't have them then. By the way, that's part of the rules for life and for anti-burnout, is to keep your relationships healthy, strong, and, have close, intimate friends and love, all that stuff. But they ask us to do stuff all the time. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to chill. I'm happy to just chill. So no FOMO is important too. Because, we could think, oh, we got to go to everything so that what they're not going to like us if we don't show up. That's complete nonsense. But that's part of that's the people pleasing that wants to play. And, I help them to see their tendencies. And I say, because a codependent people pleaser will say yes to anything. So somebody asks you to do something. Yes. So now from here on out, you're going to say no to most things. So you can say yes to the right things. It takes on such incredible, it's like, that's like, whoa. But I tell my own stories, the things that I had to learn, because I would say yes to everything. Oh, I forgot one part of my story. So, I had all this stuff going on in my dysfunctional marriage, and I was working like really that was where my certainty was, and working all the time. And then my mother came to live here, and I had to take care of her, the codependent people pleaser. So that was another layer. And then the darn hurricane with my mom at the shelter. That was it. So there was another layer. So there's the sandwich generation. There's now we've got parents and children and what we're trying to deal with. There's a lot. Yes. But I guess if there's anything I would say to somebody who's dealing with any of it, is to know that there are resources available to you. There is hope, and there is a way to, it sounds cliche, but you understand it, to rise from the ashes and actually be stronger than you ever were before, and to release the overachiever. Some people may need to release what they were doing to do something that's more authentic to them. Absolutely. But all of this change is available. It's just, it's a conscious effort, and then it's done at the subconscious. That's really the thing.
Definitely. There is a way out. You don't have to be in this burnout. You also don't have to be afraid that every time when the going gets tough that you're in a new burnout. No. There are things you can learn, tools you can use to prevent all of that. But I think in the end, a large part of it comes down to getting to know yourself really well. Getting to know the ins and outs of your user manual, what makes you you, what drains your energy, what gives you energy, what types of strategies help you in what types of situations. affirmations, being more aware of your thoughts, probably some inner work, some inner healing, maybe hypnotherapy to deal with the traumas, inner child work, shadow work. So it really, the way out there really also depends on your backstory, and how long it took you for you finally to acknowledge that you're in a burnout. I have a couple of friends that just didn't acknowledge that they were in a burnout, and they just kept going and going and going until, for one of my friends, physically her body literally shut down. Her husband needed to carry her husband needed to shower her
Wow.
husband needed to wipe her ass at the toilet. It was
That's
that
too
bad.
much.
Her husband needed to
Yeah.
feed her. That's how far she went over
It
her
happens.
limits. And for someone like that, it takes a lot longer to get back to good health, because mind and body are connected, and you're overthrowing dominoes. But for by the time it's that bad that your body physically shuts down, then I think most of your dominoes have already fallen, and before they are back up again, that will just take some time. So it's
You're a
also about,
biological being. You're a
yes,
biological being that needs to heal. And, the word sin, it just means to miss the mark. Okay. So we can fix our path, but we're still going to deal with the consequences. So no matter what I do, and I can have peace with this. I can have grace for the woman who did what she did. No matter what I do to feel better now, and to know that I don't have hyperthyroidism. Okay. So they told me I had an autoimmune condition. I don't have it anymore, but I don't have half my thyroid. That's never coming back. So
no.
the consequences are still there. You're a biological being, but you can halt the damage. The number one cause of death in women is still heart attack. And the first step in overcoming burnout in my protocol is like doing heart coherence, like continuously almost, but not really, because that's what is the easiest way to neutralize the biochemistry of stress that's in your body and begin to get that behind you where it belongs. So step
Yes.
one is that neutralizing that biochemistry of stress. Step two is addressing what's in here, which is what most of the burnout protocols will not address. They've not, they'll give you habits to have a better work-life balance, or pills,
Here in
right?
the Netherlands, they give you antidepressants, but you're not
Of course.
depressed. You're just so incredibly tired that you have no energy or motivation for anything. And that can look
That's
like
the
depression, but
third.
it's something completely different.
Yeah. Totally. Absolutely.
Yes.
So yeah. So addressing what's at the level of the subconscious and the thoughts that are going through the mind, but also that addresses the habits. And that's why it helps the subconscious. And then you can work on okay, now I have to create my rules. I'm going to make sure I have work-life balance. I'm actually going to make sure that I get sleep and treat sleep like my life depends on it, because it does. Right. I'm
Healthy
going to
habits.
say no to most things so that I can let myself recoup. That's actually step 3, which is what they would just tell you is step 1 if you went to cognitive behavioral.
Yeah, I actually read an article the other week that was about time and how time has changed. And now it's not only work time, and work time is already packed to the hilt with appointments and meetings and deadlines and schedules and stuff. But also what's supposed to be our free time is now completely booked with hikes and saunas and amusement parks and holidays and whatever hobbies we all have. And there is almost no free time, no downtime anymore. So almost every second of every day is planned, is booked, and there is no time to just be and deflate and let out what needs to be let out in order for you to be healthy again. And for people who already have been in a burnout, or who are experiencing symptoms of it, or are on the verge of it, or right in it, you need to start seriously creating alone time, me time, downtime, where you do absolutely nothing, decadently nothing.
I call it white space. You want to
Yes.
see lots of white space in your calendar, and don't you dare fill it. And I actually created a place in my home. I got a beautiful blue chaise lounge that I can And I told myself I was going to get just as good at being lazy, which was a trigger word for me,
Mhm.
as I was ever at working, because I'm freaking excellent at working. No problem. No problem. You're
Mhm.
not going to stop me. So I was like, I'm going to learn to be as lazy as I was work as I work, and white space and staring and drinking tea. And
Yes.
that's it. Like, not allowed to put anything else on my calendar. Yeah, it's
Mm.
really hard for a lot of people because
Yes.
we're taught, do and accomplish and be seen doing things. And it's just the world is much more complex. I hear what you say about time being different, because it's so true. Like,
Mhm.
I was just talking to my friend from Madrid, and she said, she just came back from Madrid. She's here in Florida again. And she's like, everybody disappears from 3:30 to 6:30. And I was like, dude, I think we'd
Yes.
have like zero burnout if we all just disappeared for a few hours a day and slept and just expected nothing, and nobody expected anything of you. Like,
Mhm.
what a different world we'd be in.
Yes, so much less pressure
Yeah.
because there's so much pressure on children to perform, to
Yeah.
live up to expectations, but also adults living up to expectations, personal expectations, societal expectations, family expectations, work expectations. It doesn't really matter, but there's
So
so
true.
much that we feel we need to live up to
Yeah.
and need to do or need to be or need to show or need to have pressure, constant barrage of pressure, and it's not healthy.
No. And no FOMO there either.
No.
Your kids don't need to be in 6 activities. They don't even need to be in any activities. They just need to be happy and healthy and
Yes.
eat good food and sleep and do well in their life. They don't need a darn thing unless
Exactly.
they ask.
Yes.
All right, but that's my advice to parents. Because they come to my office, they're like, I'm so stressed, and I have to drive this one here and that one this. I'm like, well, who did that?
Yeah. Who sent them there? Who decided
Right?
they
Who
had to go?
decided?
Yeah.
Who wrote the check? We don't write checks anymore, but who wrote the
Yeah.
check for that? Like, you
Yeah.
did. You signed up. Yeah, man. And
Exactly.
yep, it's all there, but if I think one of the major reasons is there's just too many people and there's too much going on. And for an empath, that's really hard. There's
Yes,
just too
my
much going
advice
on.
is always to stop watching the news and to stop
Yes,
reading the newspapers. I haven't done
totally.
that in
I
years, and
can't.
a
I
lot of my
can't imagine what it would do
clients
to
then
my nervous
say,
system.
but how am I then informed if I don't watch the news? How am I informed? How can
Oh,
I
trust me.
talk about subjects with other people? And I think, well, the things that are really important, you will know anyway. You will
Yep.
find out, people will tell you, there's no going
Yeah.
around it. But at least then you can make up your own mind, because here in the Netherlands, and I think in the United States, it's the same thing. The news is being regulated by certain people who want to make as most money as possible. So it's not always the truth, and it's sometimes
Mm.
exaggerated, and it's sometimes supplemented with
Well,
images and videos from
completely.
years ago, pretending it's this year's war. So it's a lot of stress on top of everything that's already going on in your life. And in the end of the day, you cannot change it. You cannot do anything about it. So of course you can feel sorry and be
You can be compassionate. That's what
exactly.
people think, because they hear I don't watch the news or I don't, and they think somehow what I'm just a cold, I'm not compassionate. Of course we're compassionate, but I know that my mind and body doesn't know the difference between my real life and what I'm watching, so I can't
Mhm.
let that in. And I
Yeah.
also know that those media outlets, they know that someone who's fearful is a better consumer, and don't doubt that. This is in the propaganda, like, papers, you can find it. If you are fearful, you are a better consumer and you're better controlled. So
Yes. Yeah.
um
That's in the end where
can't
what
even
it's
watch a
about,
scary
money and
movie.
power.
Right. I
Yes.
can't watch a scary movie or anything either, because again, my body just, I know what I can handle and what I can't. And I can handle a lot. I've got a lot of resourcefulness. I don't even like to call it resilience anymore, because I don't want to be resilient. Please just give me easy. But this, like, enough resilience. I don't want it. But I'm very resourceful now. But that's because I don't let myself become depleted.
Mm.
And if you're an empath, you are right. There are so many more reasons for us to have that full cup. And to have that, I call it just radical self-care and self-love
Yes.
and
Without guilt.
self-preservation without guilt, because what's best for me is best for everyone. If
Mhm.
I run myself ragged and I'm in the bed, well, the very people that I was running myself ragged for suffer.
It's the saying, you
And
cannot
they
pour
learn.
from an empty cup. So if your cup is empty, you cannot do anything for other people. So you need to make sure that you are energetic and as healthy as possible in order to be there for other people. Otherwise, you cannot even do that. So it's self-serving also, right? To really take care of yourself so
Yeah.
that you can do the things that you love doing the most.
Yeah,
Yes.
totally.
I've been loving our conversation, and
That's
I
been
think a
wonderful.
lot of users, listeners, watchers, viewers took a lot out of it. So if that is the case, then I would love it if you could leave a comment and maybe like the show, subscribe to the channel, or even share it with your tribe of people, because chances are very high that you know someone who needed to hear what we were talking about today, and you would doing them a great service by sharing this. And I can also imagine that you might think like, I want to talk to you. I want to talk to, yeah, well, you can always talk to me. My links are below, but also I want to talk to you, Melanie, because I feel I resonate with your energy and I'd like to know more. So where can people find you?
Well, they can find me at mindworkswithanxco.com. So my main hypnotherapy website. And if you looked up Melanie McCool hypnotherapist, I think I might be the only one, especially if you looked up the entrepreneur's hypnotherapist, which is what I call myself.
Very
And
good.
I would love to offer anybody who does find me my zero burnout business growth workshop. So if you're an entrepreneur, I've got my 5 steps to break through burnout and prosper. It's non-negotiable in my book. And you can get my rules for staying, well, for rising from the ashes and stronger than before.
Oh, that is absolutely wonderful. I'll make sure that all the links to everything Melanie just talked about are also included in the show notes. So you have absolutely no problems contacting her or taking her up on this very generous offer. So thank you, watchers, listeners, for being here, for listening to our discussion, and for showing your love and support. And thank you, Melanie, for being here,
Thanks for having me.
talking to me about this very important topic.
It was beautiful. Thank you, Barbara. Blessings.